this episode, we started researching projects that had their origin within the cassette scene and have since grown into sustained artistic careers. We spoke with Dave Kirby, whose experimental noise project Satori started in the underground cassette scene of the late 80s and has continued to develop over the last 40 years. This is cassette culture.
The postal address, the caves, the tunnels or whatever it was, yeah. That was it's the old railway tunnel that went down here and that went down to the station. Yeah, that's right. Where that theme park is, or was, sorry, it's all these...
In 1984, unemployment among young people in the UK was at its peak, reaching a post-war high of 11.9%. Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister of the Conservative government in power. Dave Kirby and Rob Maycock were living in Margate, a seaside town in Kent, on the southeast point of England. During the summer months, tourists and visitors supported a holiday economy. But during the winter, shops closed and employment dipped further. Dave and Rob found a creative output recording metal in a disused railway tunnel for their noise music project named Psychopath.
I'd known Rob for a couple of years. We were both interested in all sorts of experimental music. One day he came around to my flat with this album and he said, "Dave, you just got to listen to this." And he wouldn't let me talk. So we listened to the side one, turned it over, played side two. And I had never heard anything like that at all. This was Throbbing Gristle's second annual report. And I can remember very clearly, and it's one of those moments that absolutely changes your life, but you don't know it at the time. And I said to him, we could do that. And that was it. That was the beginning of a road that 40 years later I'm still on.
We went down this disused railway tunnel and there was just loads of metal percussion lying around. And because it was in a tunnel, it would echo. And we thought, like, we've really found what we want to do as Psychopath now. And then Dave would go home and then he'd have like loads of tape loops wrapped around his flat. And Dave's flat was like, he'd have like a loop going round and another loop laying on top of that, while he would be recording something into right channel, something into the left channel, somehow out of nothing. He was just a genius at working all these loops together.
I had a little portable tape recorder, a cassette recorder, like a halfway between a Walkman and a dictation machine, but it took full-size cassettes. Oh, yeah. And it had a condenser microphone in it with an automatic level control on it, so you couldn't adjust anything. You could just press record and record it. And it was really weird. It recorded things really weirdly because anything loud, it would squash. Right. And anything really quiet, it would amplify. So you got these really, really weird sounds. And we would go and hit bits of metal and then we'd start recording distortion and interference off of radios. It was just Wild West. But everything was done on cassettes. We didn't have a 4-track machine or anything. It was literally record something, put something over the top of it and bounce that to another tape and then bounce that to another tape until we had something that was what we thought was finished. When we put our first Satori cassette together, and we had a friend who ran a record shop in Canterbury who took a box off them and put a poster up in his window. She's brilliant, absolutely fantastic.
And those cassettes, were those things that had you produced those yourself?
We'd recorded little bits of music, we chained them together onto a master cassette, and we just duplicated them, stereo cassette deck to stereo cassette deck, photocopied the covers. Yeah, it was all. That was just how we did it. And probably if you were an indie guitar band, that would be your demo tape that you would send to record labels to get their patronage. The thing with the industrial culture and the cassette culture was that was the end product. That was it. That was it finished.
Who were the first either artists or communities that really embraced what you were doing? Do you have any points in the journey?
Absolutely, number one would be Gary Mundy at Broken Flag from Ramla. He jumped everything up a massive level when he put a tape out on Broken Flag, because all of a sudden all the people that were on Broken Flag went, oh, Gary thinks this is good enough to release.
Right.
There was still kind of a hierarchy within the scene, I think. There were people who were really respected, who did things that everybody else looked up to. But to be honest, any of the labels who said, well, I like what you do enough to put a little review in my fanzine and tell people about you, they were game changers for us, because without their help, nobody would have heard of us.
Right.
All over the world, there are these people. And I think because obviously pre-computer, pre-internet days, if you wanted to know about something, it was a lot harder to find out, especially if people said, actually, no, we don't want you to see that video. We've banned it. It's not allowed. So, of course, this network and the cassette network was the same as people sharing information. There were all sorts of leaflets and pamphlets of stuff going around, like the anarchy stuff and hunt saboteurs and things like that. All this stuff was kind of networking behind the scene. The original dark web, in a way. The first iteration of Satori kind of ended around early 1987. I moved from Margate to Northampton. And I moved on the Sunday. On the Monday, I went to the job centre. On the Tuesday, I got an interview in a kind of community programme thing. Got the job and started the next Monday. And my boss was a guy called Michael, who was wearing a red lorry, yellow lorry T-shirt at the time. So we immediately hit it off and started talking. And he said, oh, my brother's band is playing next weekend. Come and see them. You've got to meet their bass player, because he likes all this weird shit that you do. I went along, saw this band, met Justin Mitchell, and he started Cold Spring maybe a year or so later. But Justin he's a genius. The thing about Justin is that he's totally immersed in the world of interesting things. He has no fear, absolutely no fear about contacting, somebody like William Burroughs, or he will get a phone number for, Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters and say, hey, do you fancy doing the experimental album? He's got that mindset of just, well, ask. Well, they'll say no, but just ask. Maybe you'll get something.
Give it a shot.
There have been times when I've done different kinds of music. Satori hasn't been a project that's been going all the time. It has had little breaks in it, or big breaks, actually. And there was a period where Justin was actually Satori and I had nothing to do with it for 4 or 5 years. It's kind of an idea and a name. It's not a specific.
Justin Mitchell started Cold Spring Records in 1988, releasing his first home-copied cassette featuring tracks by Psychic TV, The Grey Wolves and Psychopath. The label has continued to thrive and has become a mainstay of the industrial and dark ambient scenes. As Satori began to attract international interest, for a period he found himself taking over the reins.
Dave had a studio in his house, so every Thursday I'd go to Dave's house in the afternoon and we'd record something, and had some Dave's Satori in Europe, and then Dave kind of disappeared for a few years. I mean, really well. Nobody could contact him. But I was still getting all these offers for gigs. And then a Japanese one came up. And there's a mutual friend, Neil Cheney, who was in a band called Pessary in the 80s, and he's a great composer. I put some records out by him, his film soundtracks. And I suggested it to him that maybe me and him could get together at Satori, and I would arrange everything, and he came up with a brilliant album which we toured Europe with it as well. And then about 3 or 4 years after that, Dave reappeared, and he really liked the album.
I think, yeah, again, if you can experience loud noise music live, I think you understand a little bit about what we're trying to create, the kind of environment we're trying to create. And you can maybe create that in your head when you listen to it on your earbuds on a bus, say.
Could you talk a little bit about what that is? Like, what is that live experience that gets evoked?
I'm trying to, with the more recent music, I've been trying to make it a little bit more cinematic, I suppose. I want more to be going on, and I want it more, I hate the word, but immersive. And I like people to kind of enter a world where the sound is important rather than visuals. Mm-hmm. I would like to think that people could sort of close their eyes and lose themselves in an environment. The last album was called The Woods. That was specifically about kind of a serial killer and a hut in the woods. And I wanted people to feel like they were trapped. It was kind of claustrophobic and threatening, unnerving. The new record is slightly different in that it's slightly more technological, a bit more glitchy and things like that. So that's going to be a different kind of environment.
I think that's a really interesting sort of place to be as an artist. It sounds like you've got a lot of confidence in your decisions and the aesthetic that you want to.
I think I'm like every artist. I'm 100% genius and 100% useless fraud, and depending on which way the wind is blowing. I think by now I know what I want to do. And I think I've got the capabilities to do what I want to do. And all I can do is do that. And if the rest of the world likes it, fine. If the rest of the world doesn't like it, then fine. I will probably still carry on doing it.
Yeah.
I don't feel I need to validate myself anymore.
I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about any sort of methods that you use in your music currently, or any approaches you take to making sound.
In terms of how I make music, I make music all the time. I'm not one of these people who say, okay, well, I've got to write a new album. I'll start making tracks. I record almost every day. Mm-hmm. And I love the blank canvas. I'm not one of these people who's scared of a white page. I have a sample library that I've been collecting all my life, virtually. Thousands and thousands and thousands of things. So I can say, okay, well, I want to make a noisy track, so I can pull up noisy things and just start throwing them in. And it's very scattergun to start off with. My approach is always just get stuff in there and see what sounds good, see if there's anything that inspires me. And quite often I'll put in loads of stuff, find one sound that I like and delete everything and just work with that one sound.
So your sort of method these days is electronic sources with samples and...
Everything is done on a computer.
Yeah.
And going back to my point that anything is a valid sound, I will put anything and everything in there. I have sort of sample libraries that I've built up, and occasionally if I don't feel like making music, I'll say, okay, I need some sounds of insects. So I'll go onto YouTube and I'll search around for sounds of insects and make myself a sample library. Mm-hmm. So that next time I'm working on a track, if I want some insect sounds, I've got another 50 sounds of insects. This is the sad human being I've become. I have a brilliant sample library of road drills and, male and female screams and things like that. It's the tools of the trade,
Yeah, it's a palette, right, of colours.
Yeah. So that's part of the creative process. And I'll do a track, I'll get it to 95% how I want it, and it's finished, and then I'll just archive it and move on to the next one. And then when I come to the stage where I think I've got enough material to put a record out, I'll start going through everything and picking the bits that I like and refining them, maybe trying to make them all a little bit more cohesive. And then somewhere in there, the story will come out, the theme of the record, if you like. It always used to be angry man, annoyed with everything in the world was the theme. But I'm starting to get a little bit more finessed about it now, I think.
Okay. So mellowing with age.
Yeah. Oh, not mellowing, no, definitely not. But just getting a bit more specific in what I'm ranting about, maybe.
Okay.
Episode, you heard the voices of Dave Kirby, Rob Maycock and Justin Mitchell. Music was Pressing Down by Satori from the Woods on Cold Spring Records. The Kill, Post-Mortem and Heavy Sadist by Psychopath from the Final Bow cassette. The Entity from Kanishibari by Satori on Cold Spring. Animal Girl instrumental mix by Satori, forthcoming on Cold Spring.
And when we kind of started unearthing it, it's like, this is so much more massive than I ever thought. Like, there's 60 cassette labels in Brazil. This is so incredible. But it was also daunting because we didn't have the capability to handle it. It was just like...
From its launch in the 80s, the ND fanzine in the USA covered mail art, performance and music. For our next episode, we managed to get hold of Dan Plunkett in Texas to talk about ND and his role as label runner and organiser of exhibitions and concerts for cassette scene artists.